Hello and welcome to another fully live Q&A episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we have my good friend and cryptozoology researcher Michael here to help answer any of your hacking questions and also provide some updates with interesting security tools and really whatever else you guys want to talk about. So Michael, thank you for being here today.
Of course.
So there's a lot that we're going to discuss today. We've got some excellent questions, and we've kind of looked ahead, and I've done a little demonstration, or have a demonstration planned in response to one of those questions. So anytime you guys are leaving questions on our YouTube channel, we are looking those up in advance, and we're spending a little bit of time preparing to make sure that we're able to answer those questions thoroughly. So if you have any questions throughout the stream, feel free to leave them both here in the chat and also on our YouTube channel, because we go through and pick them out every week. So hello to everybody in the chat. It's nice of you to be with us today. We're going to be talking a little bit about, of course, one of my favorite topics, ChatGPT, and then also some interesting and cool updates that have come out for the Wi-Fi Nugget. So Michael, what is a Wi-Fi Nugget?
A Wi-Fi Nugget is a Wi-Fi hacking device that is cat-shaped and cute and tiny. It's capable of running several programs, but probably one of my personal favorite is the deauth, Spacesoon deauthor. Perform various wireless attacks, and if you have, I think it's the Hunator on your laptop, you can use it for some more advanced Wi-Fi attacks as well.
So one of the things that's really cool about the Wi-Fi Nugget, which was our original design, is the fact that it can run a variety of different projects. So it can run a deauth detector where it will look for deauth packets and warn you if your network's under attack. It can run the deauthor, and it can also run MicroPython. So it can't run CircuitPython, but it can run MicroPython. And usually you would need to go to our GitHub repository, download one of these projects, and then flash it over yourself. So we have had a team member of ours, Angelina Tasobi, who has been contributing some really awesome work. And one of the things that she has done is made a flashing page for this project. So, all right, you have a Wi-Fi Nugget, an ESP8266 based Wi-Fi Nugget. I'm gonna plug it into my computer, which will, of course, use micro. Okay, cool. I got the right orientation the first time.
That's always key.
So I'm gonna go over, and on my screen, I can see the Wi-Fi Nugget flasher. Again, this is by Angelina Tasobi. Super, super cool. And what I'm gonna do is click on Connect. I can see I have my Nugget here. It should pair. This is very much still in beta, by the way. Alpha. We're still kind of testing this out. And then we can see that it's detected here. It is now connected, and I can select from this list of different things. So I can do MicroPython, I can do the Nugget deauthor, or the deauth detector. So right now I have the deauthor flash to it. So I'm going to go ahead and select the deauth detector, and you can see it kind of like confirms your choice there. I'm going to do this the hard way. So instead of just hitting program, I'm going to do it the proper way and hit erase. Live demos, anything could happen. Looks like it's erasing the memory. All right, so any old program that was on here is now gone. I'm going to hit program, and it is programming. And as soon as it's done here, I should be able to unplug it, plug it back in, and see whether or not this has worked. I also noticed that if I inspect this, I can actually get updates and see like what percentage of done it is. I don't know if you guys can see in the corner, it's like 68% done, 73% done. So while you can't see, graphically how far along this is, you can definitely look in the console and get feedback about how far along it is. Okay, so it's done. So before it was running the Wi-Fi deauthor, you can see it's actually still, you can't really see.
Yeah, you probably have to reset it by unplugging it.
I can just hit the reset button.
Reset button.
Yeah, so I'm gonna hit the reset button, and when it starts up, actually, no, you're right. I am going to have to unplug it. Let's see.
Yeah. Don't listen to me. I don't ever make these things or anything.
There we go. It has updated and now has a new program on it. So if I wanted to do MicroPython, for example, I could flash that over as well. It's just that easy. So using your Wi-Fi Nugget, if you have one, has just got a little bit easier. And if you want to pick one up, you can go to our website, retia.io, retia.io, or hackcat.com, hakcat.com, and grab one. But it's nice to do some updates on this. And again, a big shout out to Angelina for making this. It came out super, super cool. and we really appreciate her doing that.
So we do have one question about that.
Yeah.
Does the web flasher use the web serial that's built into browsers? Looks like Firefox finally started supporting it late last year.
So as far as I know, this still does not work on Firefox. And that is a result of, yes, them not supporting web serial. And this project does rely on web serial. So the nice thing here is that if you have Google Chrome, then you can go ahead and take it and just use it to connect directly to your device. And it's as simple as that. So yeah, so far I haven't seen Firefox support that, but maybe I'll give that a try in just a little bit.
Okay, so diving into questions from the chat here. I would love to hear and talk about how AI is supporting malware development. It's a growing space with interesting results.
So one thing that is important to note is that right now, if you have a degree in AI or if you like work with machine learning, you have a lot of job opportunities that are legit. There are not a lot of reasons for you to go to the dark side right now and be using it to kind of like assist criminals, because there's a substantial amount of risk. And frankly, there's so many more lucrative ways of getting in on the action without putting yourself at risk. With AI being so hot right now. So that will not always be the case, but right now, at least from what I've heard, there's pretty limited ability of like threat actors to use AI to run these sorts of attacks. And we cover, news every week, and I very rarely hear of attacks that are actually using AI in any significant way. So while it absolutely is going to be something in the future that we need to look out for, I haven't really seen it yet. So if anybody has any specific examples, I would love to see them. And of course, AI is assisting in some other things. But like, for example, ChatGPT just came out. It's still not being used as like a phishing chatbot. It's being changed all the time. It's down sometimes. So it's not really reliable enough to be used as attack infrastructure, since it's kind of still in like beta, or it's still figuring its stuff out. So yeah, I haven't really seen a lot of AI assisted attacks. Michael?
Yeah, kind of my angle on that would be, I agree with the sentiment that, if that's what you're trying to do for a living, then there's much more legal and lucrative enterprises to, work in. But I do think there are probably going to be more and more people who hack for the sport or for fun of it, learning those AI skills and starting to deploy those. On the defensive side, at a conference several years ago that I was at, Enigma Con, they were talking about AI and machine learning to automatically detect flaws in 0 days. I really don't remember too many details other than the fact that they were able to detect like similar flaws, and so stuff that hadn't been discovered but was similar to other flaws already currently known. So like if cross-site scripting flaw, it could check for those sorts of things and maybe minor variations of that, but it's not going to just spontaneously tell you a brand new category. It's not going to come up with like the Spectre CPU attack or something like that. But I can definitely see, as we go forward, as AI gets cheaper and cheaper to train and use and develop with various tools available, I can definitely imagine that will be a big part. And I think we are seeing elements of that already with things like ChatGPT or various tools built into programming IDEs to help you code. So, obviously that's not like writing a 0-day exploit for your malware right now, but that can definitely streamline both defense and attack programmers, hackers, ability to quickly write up these programs. And, I can imagine that going forward, we're going to see these proof of concepts come out a lot sooner after the CVE, just because, maybe you'll go to ChatGPT and be like, okay, here's the description of the CVE, make the exploit for me, that sort of thing.
So somebody in the chat is asking whether or not OpenAI is going to release a tool that allows you to detect ChatGPT. They already have. So they provided basically like tooling for anybody to create these sorts of like prompt detectors, or be able to like kind of tell whether or not something has been generated by ChatGPT. However, I found that you can do a lot of stuff to get around it. So I'm going to take an example here, and it needs a good amount of text in order to do this. But let me just take an example of some discussion I was having with ChatGPT. And here, let's see if it can detect it. Analyze text. This is just some Human-generated content. So why is it scoring so high as human-generated content? This is directly from ChatGPT. Well, I did something interesting here, and I'm going to go into a process that I used earlier today to mimic my own style. But basically, because I am a writer, there is a ton of my writing on the internet. So specifically on the Nullbyte website, I was able to go and take a couple of my articles and feed it into ChatGPT and tell it to name that style of writing a specific thing, and then regurgitate new articles based on that style. So by training ChatGPT on kind of like emulating my personal style, it was able to, I guess, disguise itself and make it a little bit less likely to be detected. So yes, there are ways of detecting ChatGPT, but also by modifying it, by giving it like kind of like a random seed, or giving it something that allows it to mimic another style that reduces the way that it itself would kind of just decide on doing things. You can override the way that it usually outputs text that's detectable and make it so it's much harder to detect this sort of thing. And one of my friends was just mentioning that their school has like banned ChatGPT and like said that they can tell the difference between, you know, ChatGPT and a person. But if you train ChatGPT on your own writing, especially large samples of it, it does an okay job of mimicking how a person would write. So not exactly a perfect way of catching ChatGPT here.
Speaking of ChatGPT, what did they add in the January 9th update? Do you know?
So it looks like they made it less likely to refuse to do stuff, which is funny because now it's doing a little
But it
bit
seems dangerous.
well, no. Because like before you would ask it to like make a list of like news headlines. It's like, I'm sorry, I cannot contribute that because, you know, and it'll like say something stupid. But now it'll do this weird thing where I'll be like, hey, make a list of 25 like buzzy news headlines based on the following story. And it'll be like, I'm sorry, I cannot create a buzzy news story because that would be potentially misleading. However, here are a list of 25 buzzy news story headlines. So it'll like refuse politely, and then it'll just do it anyway, which is very strange, honestly. So it was updated to basically, as one part of the update, basically stop refusing, or if it is going to refuse, then just continue to do what it said it wasn't going to do anyway, instead of just turning red. It's a little odd what the update has done, because I've noticed mine has gone rogue less. So prior to this, if you made it do something it wasn't supposed to do, it'd turn red, and it would actually do that quite often. Now it doesn't do that as often, and it will answer some of the questions without turning red that it used to kind of freak out and probably send feedback to the team developing it.
Okay, so next question. Where can I get a Flipper Zero? Can you provide a link?
Good. Well, we released our video on the Flipper phishing schemes?
I think that's going to go out tomorrow.
Okay. Hold on. Let me look.
So, surprise! But we've covered that on last week's news video, news live stream.
Yeah, so if we were to do let's do a DuckDuckGo search, because I think that this has actually started to be addressed on Google. So let's say that we want to buy a Flipper.
Should I show your screen?
Give me a second. Yes. Go ahead and show my screen. So if you do a search for like buy Flipper 1, then you're going to get like the official shop, which is going to say, hey, it's out. But if you continue to look, you're going to find like flippers in all these weird places. So I found it on Walmart, which basically seems to imply that somebody's like selling it on their like internal port, like, you know, has like contributed their own stock, or they're scalping it, but it's like very expensive. And then there's also some really sketchy websites that look as though they're Flipper. Oh, it looks like, it looks like I can't actually see them. But previously, I was able to find a couple scam websites. I think maybe the fact that we like reported them like ended up getting them taken down, that look as though they are the official Flipper store, but are absolutely not. So I think you used it as B-roll. In the video we're going to be coming out with in the next couple days. So be really careful. Currently, it looks like unless you're getting one that's scalped off of like Amazon or like Walmart or whatever for way overpriced, it looks like they are sold out at the moment. But you can follow our friend Make It Hackin' on Twitter, because he has a Flipper locator tool that allows you.
Can you show that?
It always takes me a minute to find it. But yeah. You talk for a second and I'll find it.
Yeah, so James Randolph is also mentioning that Friday more flippers are dropping. So I don't know if you have details about that, James, or if we should look that up on Twitter. But it seems that those sell out in minutes, which is very believable, and actually reminds me of like sneaker bots and other programs that people develop for when there's drops like that to like instantly buy them out. So hopefully legitimate users can actually, in fact, find some to buy. And I believe we have the flipper locator here now.
Yeah, here we go. So this is the flipper locator. Is this a dragon? What is this? Okay,
That's,
whatever.
That's a dolphin. It's a flipper, I think.
Okay, yeah, sure. It looks like a dragon, but whatever.
Okay.
No. So this is a flipper locator. This like serial dragon is like looking out for where to find one, and it will help you locate one by basically sending an automated alert anytime one of these official stores has them in stock. There's also a website, and this again is made by Make It Hacken, who makes a lot of really cool, helpful things like this. So don't get caught in a flipper scam. A lot of people are seeing them blow up on TikTok, and that is causing a surge in people who are looking for this product and ending up with a phishing page instead. So stick with the flipper locator and do not get tricked.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll pull up that. When are you guys going to show us how to actually do this stuff? And then that was a question from the car hacking video.
So I really want to do some basic web app pen testing stuff, but it's usually not very popular when we show it. So obviously we can't go and show like a live vulnerability of like you like abusing a cloud service to break into a car. Like we would definitely get taken off of YouTube for doing that. And most of the time, you know, they really don't, they don't like it when we show like specifics, but when we generalize it too much, the people who watch the videos, they don't really like it or share it that much. So as a result, like we've kind of shied away from doing some of these web application like pen testing videos, because when we just provide like, you know, a more general example, they're not as sexy as like hacking into a car. So we can definitely do some more web app like pen testing stuff. I actually really want to do that. Maybe we could make like a virtual car, like use our like nugget to like make something you have to like unlock or like or kind of mimic some of the vulnerabilities that were found in this particular attack against the web hacking like telematics server kind of thing.
So I was actually talking to the car hacking village people a couple of years ago, and that's something they were talking about, is wanting to host basically virtual cars on their website for people to hack. It was more in relation to like the OBD2 and that sort of stuff. I don't know if they ever really got into the telematics, but that's definitely something we can look into if we want to have a virtual vehicle to hack. Because I think that would be a really cool Raspberry Pi project, if you could just have your Raspberry Pi like be a virtual car.
Dolphins are secret dragons. Thanks, Leo. I did not know that. Although I feel like that's more information for
So
a
long
cryptozoology expert.
So long, and thanks for all the fish. Yeah. Okay, so next question here. This is more of a comment on the car hacking video as well. This person is saying they poked around a bit on Spirion, and nothing has been patched, and that they found another vulnerability about typing in a username and hitting enter will give you the email of the account, and then how you could potentially cross-reference that with a password list somewhere, like have I been pwned, and use that to compromise the account.
I am not surprised. So a lot of the times these telematic services are kind of set up almost like an afterthought in these like fancy expensive cars, and as a result some of the security is just really bad. The fact that they didn't do like email address verification and some other stuff like that was really like should have been like an absolute minimum that allowed people to get away with some really basic attacks against their infrastructure is just an example of how big of an impact these really simple mistakes can have. So yeah, a lot of these things ended up being actually incredibly simple, pretty elementary mistakes that allowed access to people's information. And what our commenter is pointing out is that yeah, like in some of these cases, you can put in a username, get back an email address, and then use that email address to find password breaches associated with that person. And maybe if they're reusing a password, be able to break in super easily, or at least automate the process so that the low-hanging fruit is now something you can let a bot try to go after instead of needing to do it manually yourself. So pretty sneaky and pretty scary attack.
I do wonder if the car industry is kind of going through the thing that the IoT industry went through a couple of years ago, where it's like everyone's just realized, oh, hey, I want to get this product to market, but they're not really deeply considering the security ramifications. So you get a lot of these, I guess in this case, telematics and connected vehicles, but as you said, where security is an afterthought, if a thought at all.
Yeah.
And you know, I think the IoT industry is still plagued by those problems, but hopefully there will be some industry-wide standards that come along in the coming years that will help secure these systems. So question here from our old live stream, and this is when we were doing live demos about hacking with Parrot Security OS. The debate on what is sexier, the bird or the dragon, Lawfa Mao. So did we ever settle the debate? What's sexier, the bird or the dragon? The Parrot Security OS or Kali OS?
All right, well, sexier is definitely not an objective classification. I would say aesthetically, which may be what that's referring to. Like Parrot Security OS tends to look nicer than Kali Linux does. But in terms of better support and like finding other people who've had the same problem as you, Kali Linux always tends to have a better community and ability to like troubleshoot issues that might be the first time that someone encounters them if it is on Parrot Security OS. Now, then again, they're both based on Debian, so you're not really getting a ton of difference between the two systems aside from what they come with pre-installed. So it doesn't really seem like too big of a deal for me. I mean, if you just use Debian, you would be getting a similar experience to either one, provided you installed a bunch of add-ons and packages and stuff. So,
okay. This is from last week's video. Potato Boy was commenting, for QR code printing, you should try using a 0.1 millimeter nozzle.
Yes. So my previous QR code stuff was fun and interesting in my attempt to basically see how small of a QR code you could make with a stock 3D printer. Now, if you start making modifications to the 3D printer, then obviously like you can do all kinds of crazy stuff. I was able, if we switch over to my screen, to get to a size of about a dime, maybe a little bit smaller than a dime, and get that to
and
be
that's
able to be
readable?
scanned. Yeah, so here's the proof. So does it read well? No, but it does in fact read, and using like a short URL to encode in a very small space is something that's doable. Now, this involves doing like something called a layer switch or like a color switch that's scheduled in Prisa. So I was able to like schedule this so that after the first layer of black, it was able to stop, allow me to change out for a white filament and then continue printing for a 2 or 3 layer QR code. But I was also actually able to print a single layer one that printed a positive image, like basically where the white is, and then would pause. And then I would like load in a different filament and would continue filling in the rest of it. Now, it did kind of a terrible job of this because they didn't really meet in all the places, and it looked like some of the like squares were gonna fall out. But it did manage to actually make a like double-sided QR code with a single stock nozzle and just 2 different rolls of filament. So that was really cool. I've never done something like that before, and I'm gonna continue to work on it because the only really thing I did was set a super high Z hop, so it just jumps up and moves around and doesn't hit the previous layer when it's printing like 2 different models on the same bed without like removing one first. But yeah, kind of an interesting challenge and something that I'm doing to try to make some QR codes that are more durable and also super tiny than a sticker would be. So yeah, if you want a QR code that will last for a really long time and can be out exposed to the elements, and hopefully this will be something that would allow you to do that. Okay,
so next question here is, after having a long conversation with ChatGPT, I was recommended an Anycubic Photon 3D printer, which is also able to print PCBs. Do you guys know anything about it? I'm not familiar. So I looked at it briefly online, and that's a resin printer, it looks like.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know about it being able to print PCBs, but I think if you do a Google search, you'll probably find some reviews about that. I know the Elegoo Mars, I think it's Mars 3, is also a similar, it's a separate company. But I don't know if it would be able to do the PCB stuff. Honestly, like I'm kind of the opinion these days that if you want a PCB, like PCBWay and JCL PCB and these JLC, alphabet soup of PCB manufacturers out there can get you PCBs high quality, made relatively quickly and at affordable prices. So unless you specifically are trying to do something that you really need to rapidly prototype, that might be a better bet.
Yeah, for a while there was like a something called an other mill that allowed you to go through and like make precision PCBs. It's on my screen. It's been discontinued though. The company was bought by like some other company that makes like a much more expensive machine and basically like put out to pasture. So this was a really cool tool that I was introduced to in college, where it takes like a copper clad like foam board and it like mills out traces and it does it with a very precise tool. That was really awesome. I was amazed by that, and it allowed us to do some really cool prototyping in class that normally we'd have to send out for But I haven't seen any like high quality PCBs that could be done, that currently can be done with a 3D printer. Although I imagine the implications of like a conductive filament or something would be really cool. I just don't know how they would deal with heat, which is the primary problem associated with most electronics. Is like, how do you deal with heat? If you have like a filament that starts to melt at a certain temperature, then obviously like that might end up being a problem. But yeah, like being able to print some of these really tiny things just shows me that, yeah, you can make some really, really small stuff with 3D printers, and that might end up being really cool or helpful if you're able to do something like use conductive traces to make like a little like PCB or the equivalent of.
Okay, how hard would it be to capture TLS and SSL keys through a man-in-the-middle attack? I'm guessing like if you hack their Wi-Fi or something like that.
Oh, so I don't know. I don't really do that. So I've done like downgrade attacks and stuff like that. And I've also done man in the middle stuff. I'm honestly not sure. I'm not sure. That's an interesting question. Yeah, so I haven't done a lot of like trying to intercept SSL stuff because it's really hard, and downgrading or like doing other sorts of like poisoning attacks like might end up being easier than trying to just like break it or intercept it. I'm genuinely not sure about that, so I would have to look it up to be able to be sure.
Okay, weren't regular inkjets used to print PCBs back in the day?
I've heard yes. I've heard yes, although I believe that was like part of a larger chemical process, because like making PCBs is fascinating, and there's like tons of steps to it, and like modern PCBs are usually made from like like a negative that's basically projected onto something that then like has a like a chemical reaction, and then is like washed, and then that's used as a negative, and then that's put copper on. It's just like a ton of different steps. So making something that functions as a PCB, like I've been to a PCB factory, they're crazy. There's so many steps it has to go through in order to have like vias and all these like connecting things, like putting the layers together and testing, and like all these like crazy prongs that come out and like test each board. So there really is a lot of a process to it. I believe you could probably make like, you know, very basic single or maybe dual layer like prototype boards, but anything more complicated than that is going to get crazy pretty fast.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a question here, and also I'm going to throw in the response, and we'll comment on both. Hey, Security Forward, is there a free and easy VPN for Linux users? I'm new to the OS. And then a response was, free VPN means you are the product.
Yes. Yeah. So there's been a lot of consolidation in the VPN marketplace, particularly from companies that have a known history of like doing surveillance activities or being involved in surveillance companies. And that's obviously not good. Like if you are somebody who has been involved in like surveillance and you're starting to consolidate like VPNs, that's why I don't really use PIA anymore, is because like they were bought up and kind of consolidated by a larger company that has been connected to a lot of surveillance stuff around the world that is not somebody who I would want to be my VPN provider. So like I personally like to use Molvad. I think they're cool. You can mail them an envelope full of like quarters or whatever, and they'll like set you up with some VPN stuff. And yeah, I would say that in general there are some good services out there, but they're generally paid. You can always use Tor, but of course then you get into the problem where like at that point you don't have access to large portions of the internet because your traffic is suspicious and nobody wants to deal with you. So there are definitely trade-offs there.
Yeah. The other solution, but I would not suggest this if you are in fact a beginner, is rolling your own VPN. That technically is free. I mean, assuming you already have a router or you already have some of that set up, you would need, say, for instance, an AWS instance or some other cloud instance, and then you would set up a VPN between that cloud instance and your home network or wherever you're trying to connect to. You'll often see small, medium businesses and large businesses using VPNs like this to connect back to servers and stuff to do it securely. You could use that same thing to create your own homemade VPN. I guess that's technically free, but you would need the cloud service provider, and if you're beginning, it's probably a little more advanced than you want to start off with.
I would strongly advise against beginners rolling their own VPN.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then also, as Kody was alluding to, you can't always trust paid VPNs even. I mean, it's better than nothing, but also you have to question sometimes, are nation states or other individuals going to be targeting those VPN companies, or those VPN companies going to sell that data various things like that.
Yeah, and in general, like a VPN is supposed to help you on like a sketchy local network from getting redirected to a phishing page or having somebody eavesdrop on your traffic. It's really like it presumably isn't going to do a lot to protect like the what comes out of the endpoint. So like if you're worried about the VPN company knowing like what you're doing, like they're going to know what you're doing because that's kind of like the service they provide. And they can say that they don't do logging, but a lot of them have been found in court to actually be doing logging because they're able to respond to law enforcement and actually give them information, which kind of contradicts the claims that they make. So be really careful when you're picking a VPN and just make sure that it's for the correct threat model. Because for me, I'm happy with Molvad because it prevents me from being vulnerable to local attacks. But if I was looking to like cover up some sort of like sketchy activity, I probably wouldn't use them.
This kind of ties into the next question we have, which was from the Netgear 0-day video. Most people, when they get their router, they set it up and forget about it until something goes wrong.
Yes. So
yes, it's the unfortunate truth.
the majority of different of routers out there that get hacked because they are running default settings from the first time they were set up and never changed. Nobody gets joy, or at least like not many people get joy from like periodically updating their router settings. Like most people just want to ignore it, and until there's a problem, yeah, they're not going to mess with it at all. So it's shocking the number of small businesses, coffee shops, like all sorts of places that have either default credentials or default settings that are vulnerable running on the router. So I would say in like 40% of cases, like you'll find routers that are just by default way too trusting of the network that they are running for the application that they're in. So yeah, like most of the time people do not update these settings. It's a huge problem, and networks, the router is the gateway to that. And once you're inside as a hacker, there's lots of interesting stuff you can do.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of to hone in on that somewhat. Like you see a lot of these like restaurants and places like this that offer free Wi-Fi, but then if you just do a normal port scan or anything, you can see the router, and then the router has the default credentials, which can easily be looked up online. And obviously that's a very concerning issue security-wise, especially when, the guest network is the same as the point of sale system network and all the, security cameras, that sort of thing. It's very concerning, especially when you have access to that router.
I like this question. Wi-Fi hacking seems to have been a good starting point for new people in the space. Do you think it's a great way for people to start? Yes. So Wi-Fi is everywhere. Nearly every device that you interact with that, is like a cell phone, a computer, a tablet has Wi-Fi built in. The fact that the technology is everywhere and we understand how it works on a kind of general level makes it so it's not that complicated of a subject to learn, although it does require a little bit of networking background to understand some of the nuances of why things are happening. But even if you just want to understand relatively simple concepts like deauthentication, it's a pretty easy technology to get started with, and the fact that it is everywhere means that it's pretty simple to start experimenting with it too. So I would highly recommend Wi-Fi hacking as a place to get started, providing that you're interested in and willing to get a little bit more experience with networking as you do it, because that really is the biggest part of it, is it's all related to networking.
So someone was asking about a tutorial for Raspberry Pi VPN. I know there are tutorials out there. I don't have one on hand rapidly. Just look up like Raspberry Pi and OpenVPN. The Nullbyte website does have an article from 2011 that I just looked up about using OpenVPN, but obviously that's going to be a little outdated. But yeah, OpenVPN or some other solution like that on a Raspberry Pi could be a good starting point.
All right, we've got another question that I've been preparing to answer. Are you ready to ask it?
Okay. Oh, is this the Sasquatch question?
No.
Okay.
No. It's about the APIs.
Okay. Shoot.
No,
Oh,
you're
I
the
have
one
the
that has
question.
the question, yeah.
I was like, I thought you. Anyway, you got me out of order here now. Okay, yes, actually, here I have it. It was the next one. You got a little too eager. Okay, this was on our video about what's the best beginner programming language. The using a search tool for city data is interesting. Can you point me in the direction of a project that I can learn on as a noob?
Yes. So I went ahead and wrote an article on this. And the way that I did this was kind of dumb, but I actually used ChatGPT to automatically write an article in the style of Nullbyte on how to do this. So this is going to be a multi-part answer. Part is going to explain how I use ChatGPT to do this, and part of it is going to explain the answer to the actual question. So I've written a lot of stuff on the internet, especially like my nullbyte stuff has become really popular. So I was able to just take a lot of my own text and feed it to ChatGPT, and then I was able to go and find an API that has documentation, feed ChatGPT the documentation, and ask it to write an article explaining how to use like bash scripting to take advantage of this API and pull down data. So basically how to write a simple little OSINT tool with a bash script. So it also did this in Python, but I like the bash script version better. And it messed this up a lot of times. But the basic process I used here was asking ChatGPT to mimic a style. In this case, it was just my own personal style, and then giving it access to the sorts of information it needed to figure out how to use the API. Now, it didn't do things perfectly. And if I grab, let's see, over here, my conversation with ChatGPT had some problems. So I said, write an article in the nullbyte style explaining what the city API we discussed is and why open APIs are useful for open source intelligence. And I gave it some more information. I gave it an example of a successful query. And then I gave an example of a bash script that actually it wrote itself prior. And it was able to continue to implement this, give me code examples back, and provide like a decent explanation. As I go through this, I also had to do some troubleshooting with it. And I found that it was not actually able to give me something that was completely clean. So in one case, I got an error and I just said, the bash script in the example produces the following error. Can you fix it? And it actually fixed the error. It said it's occurring because the JQ command is not installed on the system. It gave me the installation instructions for installing it on Mac OS. And then it went through and kind of gave me like some other ways I could kind of do this as well. So I told it to then rewrite the article, including the instructions to install JQ and avoid the error. And boom, it did it. It wrote an article that gave the instructions to install everything necessary. But then it faltered and I had to be like, continue. And then it actually started writing the article again, but from a different point. So I had to regenerate it all over again. So this was an interesting experiment in seeing whether or not ChatGPT could learn the way that I myself explain things and then replicate it by just ingesting like an API documentation and writing this. So is the article good? I would give it like a 6 or 7 out of 10. Like it's not a great article. It does an okay job. Maybe more like a 6. But as a start, it was actually a pretty good way of explaining to somebody how to use something by just taking the style of an instructor, taking instructions on how to use a piece of technology, and then asking ChatGPT to apply it to a specific scenario and write up an article in the nullbyte style. So I was amazed by this and kind of delighted that I could actually get ChatGPT to roughly, I'll say, copy my style. And even though it was wrong and I had to basically run this bash script and make sure that it actually worked and then test it again and whatever, I was able to give it its own feedback. And this thing not only figured out how to write like me, it also figured out how to write example code like me and then troubleshoot its own example code. So I was hugely impressed by this. You can see the article that is a result of this. But yeah, I was very pleased by what ChatGPT was able to do. So let's go ahead and get into this. Back to my screen. We're going to take a look at how I, as a programming beginner, was able to start getting into creating OSINT tools. So where can you find data and what does it look like? Well, here's an example of one of the polls that I did where I accessed a database that is provided by the city of Los Angeles to let me get all this messy JSON data about properties. So if I want to like start learning about who is doing contracting or who is doing work on a certain building or a certain property, then I can use the city database to learn more about them. So this is just one example. And if you want to get started looking for your own data, you can go to data.gov. Now, data.gov is a huge, just massive list of all these open data sets that are available for developers to access. And here you can see I'm pulling some crime data and I'm able to filter it by like what type, geospatial tags. Like I can really get specific. And in this case, I'm saying I only want to see JSON data related to crime. And I can add like other sorts of things as well in order to filter the data down and get more data sets. Now, once I select something that I want to use, let's say that I want to look into crime incidents in the city of Honolulu. It'll give me information about how to use the API. But what I found is while data.gov is good, I really like city and state specific data sources as well. So as an OSINT person, like most of the data I know actually lives inside these databases. And you can't just do a Google search to find the data inside. You need to perform a query, and you need to actually access the data in the database and call for a specific piece of information, because it doesn't give you everything and it can't be indexed by Google. So as a beginning programmer, I can go on lacity.org's like data portal. So let me go back to their data catalog, and you can see what this looks like. And this is basically a catalog of all the different data sources available through the city of Los Angeles that can be filtered in much the same way. Now, I tend to find that liquor licenses, like all building permits, all these sorts of things have treasure troves of information about businesses, about properties, about people. So being able to write a quick wrapper in order to make a query to this in more natural language is something that makes it easier for other researchers or journalists or other people to use. So this is something I like to do to practice like interacting with APIs and finding data sets that are cool to use and end up with a useful OSINT tool. And I've actually been featured on like Kitploid a bunch of times for these dumb tools that I've made. So, all right, so going back to the data set that I found, the one that we're going to be looking at today is building permits. So this was updated January 9th, 2023. Sounds recent to me. We can see that it is included in a prosperous city. LA has some like funny tags on their data. But it is a JSON data set. We can access it in multiple different ways. It has 1.57 million rows of information that, again, are not available on Google. You have to actually query this data in order to get it back with this database. So because the city of Los Angeles provides this information, we can see also little things like a sample of a data table, and we can see the different fields that are available. I'm including like what, who the contractor is, what the property is, all this good stuff. But how do we actually use this? It's a little bit confusing. So if we click on the API, then we can see that there's actually API documentation. And going to the API documentation, we can learn a little bit more about what we need to do to properly call this. We will get examples of how to access the endpoint. And also we can see there's information about app tokens. So application tokens, Michael, you know about application tokens, don't you? You've worked with them before. What's the purpose of an app token?
For what I remember is for like authenticating for APIs.
Exactly.
And I think they're pretty straightforward to work with, but some of the authentication for the APIs can get a little annoying sometimes, especially if you're a very new beginner programming.
Yeah, so a lot of these APIs will require some sort of authentication that you get when you sign up with them that says, hey, I'm allowed to access this data, and you can associate all this data access with my account. That way, if you start using up more than your fair share, or if you start doing something funky, they can keep an eye on it. Now, you can use most of these APIs without having an API key. That's really cool and a nice thing about the city of Los Angeles. A lot of their data does not require you to have an API key, although it will be throttled if you don't have one once you get above a certain limit. So be advised, it is probably a good idea to get an API key if you want to write a tool that's able to do a lot of digging. So in this API documentation, you will get like a general like kind of example of what this looks like, and then you can see the way that you can construct a filter in order to get back data that's actually relevant. So in this case, let's say that we want to build a tool that allows somebody who knows a street address to get information about contractors who've been working on that building and have maybe gotten a permit, or maybe different building permits that the people who are living there or who own the building have gotten. Let's say that there's a bunch of construction. We want to know like who's behind it. Okay, well, we have a lot of different things here that we can use to get that information. One of them is some kind of confusing things like street name, okay, but they also have street direction. So the address field here is actually broken into a couple different things. We have the address start, the address end, the street direction, and then the street name. So if we have like a street on, let's say 123 Hoover, North Hoover Street, we would need to specify street name is Hoover, street direction is north, and then address end would be 123. So that's how we would construct a query in order to get information back. And when we do that, it looks like this. So if you can see my URL here, we have a standard URL that is to call the data set, and then we also have street name street name equals N, street direction equals E. In this case, we're going to East N Street. A little confusing in this example.
Okay.
But then the address end is 22. So this is to look up information on 222 East N Street. And it gives us back a lot of information about 222 East N Street. So if we want to modify this a little bit, we can do so. and try to see if we can get a valid result. So I went around and did a little bit of searching, and look, I managed to find this is the Hoover Hilltop Apartments at 165 North Hoover Street. So let's go ahead and see if we can modify that just in this request. So what was it, 165?
I think something like that.
165. The street name is going to be Hoover.
Yeah, and just
and the direction is going to be north.
Quick aside here too, if you are a noob kind of playing around with these APIs, just entering different data and like changing some of those fields, you can find, let's say, undocumented API features sometimes, which can be quite fun.
Yeah, so once we craft this request, we're actually able to get this information back pretty easily. And we can see that we have elevator services involved. We can see there's a lot of different information here for this specific property. So ChatGPT has been nice enough to use a bash script to actually string this together into something a little bit more interactive. So let me show you what our delicate ChatGPT has done. Let me enlarge this a little bit, and I'm going to go to nano bquery.sh. So this was actually written by ChatGPT. I told it to ingest that API documentation and write up a quick little example that would ask the person who's looking to search this API for the address that they're looking for, and then return the results, but also make them pretty. So it's basically like prettifying or beautifying the JSON that comes back.
Can you close that real quick and then reopen it? I don't think our screen capture
Oh, interesting.
has captured that.
It doesn't, wait. That's so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't like that at all.
So apparently HDMI capture does not
Like Nano.
Nano
Why
at
does
all.
it like Nano?
Probably
Okay.
something to do with the way it's
Okay, we'll switch
displaying
away
it.
from my screen for a second. And I'll pull up something else instead that I can use to just copy and paste the code. That's
Yep.
so funny. I've never, like, why would it hate Nano so much?
Yeah, I'm
That's
not sure.
funny too.
Because in theory, it should be cloning your screen. but-
Yeah, so what we're going to look at once I'm able to get this back up is, there we go. Let's see, will it show it? Okay, yeah, it will. All right. So this is a bash script that was written by ChatGPT, and its objective is to make it possible, get out of here, is to make it possible to input the street name, the street address, and then the direction of the street. Now this is important because we can't complete a query without this, and it is pretty much the minimum amount of information that we need to do. But as you can see here, it creates the bash script. It will read in the street name, it'll read in the address, it'll read in the street direction. And then at the end here, it formats the URL. It then puts the response of that URL through JQ in order to make it pretty. So let's go ahead and take a look at this tool, if it'll let us, and see if we can actually run it. So once we get this very, very basic bash script, I'm going to write bash bquery.sh. Okay, so street name is going to be Hoover. It doesn't need to be all caps. I'm just doing it because, why not?
Now it doesn't even want to show the
Now
terminal.
it doesn't want to show the terminal?
That's hilarious.
It is not. Okay, there we go.
This is why
No, it's fine. It's fine.
live demos.
All right, so you guys, everyone can now see it. I just needed to make it so that it was tiny. So the address here, if I remember correctly, we decided on 165. So 165. And then the direction is going to be, it was north, right? North Hoover. There we go. So it pulls down the information,
Nice.
and we have this neat little bash script that makes it so that provided we know, like 123 North something street, we can get all the relevant information about that particular building. So we can see like the permits for them. We can see the contractor's address. We can see the contractor's information. We can get a longitude and latitude. So this is, again, really useful information for anybody who's doing an open source investigation, needs to know the history of a building, identify like construction contractors, like maybe get in touch with them. And frankly, like these sorts of tools are super, super easy to build with these really, really well-documented APIs that are open, don't even require you to use authentication in order to access them. Yeah, so just be aware, the limitation is if you are building tools like this and you're not using an app token, then eventually you are going to get rate limiting. So if I were to keep using this over and over and over, eventually it's going to limit how much I can hit that API, and I'm going to want to sign up for an app token if I really want to get around that limit. Although sometimes the limit that they give you is not that great either, even if you do sign up for an API token. So
a couple of quick recommendations. So I do have a video on Hack 5 about getting started with APIs. Some of the quick things I recommend are in Chrome or Firefox, right-clicking and inspecting web pages. You can often see the API going on behind the scenes. You can similarly use like Wireshark or something like that to analyze an app's traffic coming from your phone. A lot of those are encrypted now, but less secure apps will still have APIs that you can start to reverse engineer. And then the other tool I would highly recommend is Postman, and using that. Maybe if you're less fluent with Bash or you just like a prettier interface, Postman's a lot easier to use than what Kody just showed.
Wow. I didn't see that everybody was getting super excited about the fact I use Nano.
Oh, yes.
Hell yeah. Okay, cool. I'm glad that I found my people. Yeah, like why? Like I'm not gonna get in the Vim fight. Like I don't want to like panic and not know how to escape. I'm just gonna use Nano.
Okay, so a bunch of questions piled up while you were giving your demo.
Yeah.
So is ChatGPT consistently adding to its data set, or is it fixed at that one point in time?
It's fixed at that one point in time.
Okay. And then do you know of any like open source ChatGPT like type things that someone could run on their own?
Unfortunately, no. This is something that was very expensive and time intensive to train, and it's not entirely clear like what exact data set they used. It's not public, and that's kind of their secret sauce. And that's the way that this is going to go. Like frankly, like these sorts of models are like very expensive to make, train, and maintain. So you probably will not see an open source version of this, at least for the foreseeable future.
Is it true that ChatGPT is completely free?
No. I mean, it is right now, but it won't be. Like,
Yeah.
for sure, no. I mean, because, like, right now,
Not indefinitely.
it is
for
so
free.
much more useful than Google at doing certain things. Like, any question that requires context to answer well, it will always outperform Google. And that's why Google's freaking out. Like, they don't know what to do about this because, like, they're seeing that, like, if they don't have something like this to compete with it, like, they are going to become less useful. Because I don't ask Google why this error is happening. Like, why would I? Like, it has no idea.
Is this Alphabet's next multi-billion-dollar acquisition? Is that what you're saying?
Well, Google or Microsoft was going to invest $10 billion in OpenAI. So, frankly, like they really need to figure this out if they want to be able to compete with OpenAI. Because if Google and Microsoft can't figure out a way to make their search understand context and provide like real useful feedback like we're getting from ChatGPT, like creativity and like not just taking and organizing the information it has, but using it, then we're not going to see people use Google the way that they used to, because it's not good for doing certain tasks, like identifying what the error is when ChatGPT is the one that recommended the code in the first place.
I believe you have strong opinions about Docker. Would you like to share those with the audience?
Docker's great,
Okay,
just not for people running Mac OS.
I see.
That's pretty much it.
Oh, yeah, so someone's saying that Microsoft did in fact buy 49% of ChatGPT for $10 billion.
There you go.
That's a lot of money.
That's a steal.
Steal, he says.
No, I'm saying, like, frankly, when I look at the way that I search for information, I find myself asking ChatGPT for creativity questions, for inspiration on, like, directions I can take, like titles and other mundane things that like chew up my creative time, but don't provide a lot of like value. So, if I'm able to get 25 suggestions for like an article title, and 2 of them are good and I can put my own spin on it, but like it hits on like something that I think is like catchy, that's a great use of ChatGPT, and Google cannot do that. So I find myself using ChatGPT like at least a couple of times a day for like either creative tasks, marketing stuff, or like otherwise like coming up with just writing this article. I used it to automatically ingest a piece of legislation and write a rebuttal to that piece of legislation in a specific character's voice. So because you can do things like that, it really automates some things that were impossible to automate before, and gives you more access to information in a changed state than just kind of presenting you with the unfiltered information that somebody else has put on the internet.
Yeah, so James Randolph was commenting that he had, heard that API hacking was where a lot of the like low-hanging bug bounty fruit was. And I can say that is probably true, especially if you're just getting into this. Like when I barely knew any Python programming, I was able to interface with an API. And one of the flaws I found was pretty basic. Basically, there was like an API call to pull down a particular profile, but it took that profile as like an ID number that was contained in a list. And it expected just one ID number in that list. But you could easily add 100,000 ID numbers to that list, and all the ID numbers were just like starting at 1 and then ending at like 10 billion, or what each new user was added on sequentially. So you could easily just write a Python program that would send I think I could do like 10,000 profiles at once and just like draw them all down. So yeah, there's some pretty silly flaws. Now, obviously, that was better part of a decade ago, so hopefully there's not flaws that easy anymore, but you never know.
So we have breaking news. Apparently, the Flipper Zero has a special serial connection to the device that allows you to do a sub-gigahertz chat with nearby flippers.
That's pretty cool.
I cannot test this because we only have one flipper. I've been looking to buy a second one to like sort of test these interactive features, but as many viewers probably noticed, they are sold out. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to wait.
So if that sounds interesting to you, look into a project called Meshtastic. It is using sub-gigahertz, 915 megahertz LoRa frequency to create a mesh network that allows you to connect to it over Bluetooth to your phone, and then you can text people around you and stuff like that.
So we have a question, which is, what will the results of coding a perfect crawler? Let's see. Oh, wait. So, no, that was the wrong question. What will the results of coding a perfect crawler with ChatGPT API? So one thing to keep in mind is the more complex a task gets, the more terrible ChatGPT is at doing it. Just on this simple example, the first 3 things that it gave me did not work at all. So it makes mistakes all the time. It has no idea that it's making mistakes, and it can't test its own code, or it doesn't seem to be able to test its own code for errors or other problems before presenting it to you. So it will give you code that absolutely does not run, and you will need to babysit it and have at least some knowledge of what you want and like what the problem is in order to get it to refine its code to the point that it actually works and works well. So getting it to program a perfect anything at this point seems to me like a lot of work, where you could probably program it by yourself by the time you get ChatGPT to do it, if it is something that's advanced. One of my friends on Twitter was amazed by all the answers they were getting from ChatGPT and how they were solving all their problems left and right. And then when they actually tried to apply those fixes, they found out that almost none of them worked. So yeah, ChatGPT is not good at everything. It definitely has its flaws, and it will give you messed up code that does not run confidently. And sometimes it will leave it to you to figure out exactly why it's not working.
Yep. And I believe we are just about out of time. If y'all have any final questions, we can try to do some rapid fire questions. Otherwise, don't forget to leave them in the comments section below this video, and that's where I'll draw from for next week's Q&A.
Yeah, no, I was super, super excited to try out some of these ChatGPT features. The fact that it was able to make an example piece of bash scripting for an API that I just gave it the raw documentation for was really cool, because obviously it's not able to like go out and get information from the internet, but you can manually just copy and paste that information into it and give it the context it needs to do things like, write code to make a query. And that's the origin of the code that we went over today. So if you are a lazy programmer and you want to build an OSINT tool, you can go to something like the LA City Data and find an API that provides interesting access to information about businesses, people, property, whatever you want to do. Find out how the filters work by checking out the API documentation, or just dump it into ChatGPT, and you yourself can write one of these really, really easy OSINT tools that allows you to access public data to provide better research, or to just practice your ability to program and interact with data sources on the internet. And again, if you're doing OSINT, most of the information on the internet actually lives in these databases, so you need to be familiar with how to query city databases if you need to do online research at some points. So it's really good practice, and if you need someone to help you, then obviously ChatGPT is now there to help you write some sample code and get started.
Yep. And just to elaborate on what I was saying earlier, that's showing my screen, hopefully now. Okay, I don't know why it's not showing my screen. But anyway, so Meshtastic, yes. That is a open source, decentralized mesh networking platform, I guess. It's software that goes on hardware, so it's pretty hardware agnostic. There are multiple hardware devices you can buy. Usually they're under $100. I think they're around 50 or so. Basically, it can use like an ESP32 and then a LoRa microcontroller chip tied together on a PCB with lithium-ion battery, so that way you can leave it in place. Since LoRa is so low-powered and it's not using the Wi-Fi portion of the ESP32, it can be pretty power efficient and stay in place for a couple days.
And also a shout out to Simply Cyber, who is in the audience. If you want to check out his channel, it's 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. And our final shout out always is, of course, Varonis. If you want to check out the state of cybercrime or some of the attack simulations, there's a lot of really great free content on Varonis. You can check it out at varonis.com. And thank you to them for letting us do the stream every week. It is a lot of fun, and we love getting to talk with you and answer your cybersecurity questions.
Yeah, to elaborate on that a little, the State of Cybercrime is a monthly webinar that recaps the biggest cybersecurity news of the previous month. And the new one will be going live on YouTube as soon as I get it up after this live stream.
Yeah, guess who edits it?
Yeah.
This guy. It's this guy. All right, so thank you to everybody. If you're watching this on repeat, or if you are just not able to get in your question in time, then make sure to leave it on the YouTube channel, because we actually look these up. I spent like 45 minutes preparing to answer this one question about using APIs today. So we will put in all of our energy to making sure that we answer these questions well and get back to you. So we will see you next week. Bye.